Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith and you're watching another episode of Overbooked here on the channel. This is the series where I talk about every single book on my shelves because, like Dr. Avranakan, I want to complete my project even if it means becoming something truly terrifying. Today we are talking about Adrian Tchaikovsky's Children of Time trilogy, or 3 books so far, a G. Quick disclaimers before we start. I had a review copy for at least book 3 in this series. Regardless of where books come from, nobody's paying me to talk about books and all opinions are my own. I will be talking about all 3 books in this series, but I'm going to try not to make any major spoilers. If you do want to go in knowing absolutely nothing, pause the video, come back when you've read them, we'll talk about it then. And I will link the story graph for the books below in case you want to check out any user-generated content warnings. I will say, if arachnophobia is a reason you can't read particular books, this is not going to be a series for you. This is an adult sci-fi series from author Adrian Tchaikovsky. 3 books exist so far, published between 2015 and 2022. Those books are Children of Time, Children of Ruin, and Children of Memory. I do have a video up just for Children of Memory, so if you want to check that out, I'll try and link it if I remember. Adrian Tchaikovsky is a UK-based author whose books have a focus on AI, technology, and also zoology, which he studied. I'm also reading another one of his books at the moment, which has a focus on anthropology. So suffice to say, he's doing all the ologies. Another thing that came up on his website was epic, fantastical, and what was it? Epic, galactic and fantastical settings, which I would say tracks. I'll give you the broad plot summary for Children of Time, just to situate us in the kind of series we're talking about. Humanity, set forth from a collapsing Earth in order to find a new world on these great ark ships. The majority of the people on the ships are frozen in a kind of cryogenic stasis. Periodically, people on the ship will wake up. So it has this idea of hundreds of thousands of years passing, but humans are remaining the same age. That is one aspect of the story. The other aspect of the story is the idea of a terraformed world where, essentially, due to plot reasons, instead of apes having accelerated evolution, which was the plan, spiders and other, insects. I know spiders aren't insects. Don't come for me in the comments, but that kind of creature have that accelerated evolution instead. So half the book is kind of a thought experiment about humanity existing on long space journeys and a kind of regression almost in our evolution. And the other side is a thought experiment of what would a world where you had giant sentient spiders look like? What would their technology be? What problems would they face? As usual, when talking about trilogies, I'm not going to get into the plots of book 2 and 3 in great detail because there is an element of that is always going to spoil the first book. What I will say is that all 3 books are self-contained, which I think you'd expect over a kind of 8 or so year publishing period. They all have complete surrounded stories, but they are all connected and you do have to read them in order, at least in my opinion. My favourite aspects of all 3 of these books are those parts that are definitely drawing more on zoology than anything else. I think Children of Time is such a cool book for that reason. I would say if you're going to read any of these, you could just stop after Children of Time if you wanted to. That idea of the spider civilization is so interesting, and I think what I really like is the way that that first book tackles time jumps and shows you the progression of that spider society in really interesting ways. You see the leaps forward, you see the stalling points. It is a almost like watching a time lapse where you're just seeing those key moments. It feels slice of life, but for spiders, which is very fascinating to me. That is still the case, definitely, in book 2 and less so in book 3, but for good reason. I really like Adrian Tchaikovsky's way of posing that thought experiment and then seeing it through. You can tell a lot of thought and research has gone into this. That does lead to some problems, which we'll talk about later on. But broadly speaking, I think the big selling point of this book, the giant sentient space spiders, that bit delivers. It delivers on that aspect. And because I've talked about that, I will go on to talk about the human side of the story, which I think I most clearly see the value of in Children of Time. I think Children of Ruin and Children of Memory, there's complicated stuff to do it. I think they're less interesting than the spiders, but having done multiple rereads, I definitely started to see the connection between the spider plotline and the human plotline and this idea of evolution and devolution and that kind of thing happening. I thought that was interesting. I think there are some really cool human characters. There are some interesting human elements. Some of the human parts are where the real horror of the story comes into play. I think that's mostly true in book 2 and book 3. There are some really spooky bits that I think are spooky because of the human connection. But if you were going to ask me, would you rather have just the human plotline or just the spider plotline, it's spiders all the way. Spiders all the way down. The new book from John Green. I will touch on that horror aspect. These aren't horror books. I think that science fiction of this kind does tend to lean in a slightly horrific direction. If you're dealing with the idea of a world where humans cannot survive in space, if you're not writing off that element as we all have magical spacesuits and we're all fine, there is a horror element to survival in space. As I say, book 2 and book 3, I think, have really spooky plot lines to them. Both of them in almost a kind of psychological fear kind of way. I think there's something very primal about the fear in book 2, and similarly that kind of eerie spookiness in book 3 as well. I don't think I would dub these horror books by any means, but I think it is interesting the way that so much of the theme of being afraid of something because you don't understand it comes into play, and you as the reader understanding things at the same pace as which the humans understand things, and that information being revealed very slowly leads to you having that same fear response going into a, oh, okay, I understand this, how are they going to solve the problem, oh, it's the end of the book, great, kind of storyline. I think it's a really interesting reading experience for that reason. I will say, I talked about these books are very well researched, there's an awful lot in them. Adrian Tchaikovsky is trying to pull off a lot of different thought experiments at once. I do think that means they feel quite overwritten at times. I would say book 3 probably most of all, I suspect, but that might be because I've read book 3 the least, so it felt that way at the time. I know some people don't feel that way at all. I know some people just couldn't get through these. It's probably a case of depends on where your mood is for reading at that particular point in time. I just think it's worth mentioning. I think they could have done with an edit of some of the human elements in pretty much all of the stories. My other thing is, if you don't like spiders, don't read this. If you don't want those elements, this is not going to be a book for you. I say maybe it would make you come around to spiders if you were already on your way in a journey of trying to embrace spiders as not being terrifying. I don't like spiders in my house. I'm okay with looking at them on a video, so maybe I'm not the best person to speak on that. If you have terrible arachnophobia but enjoyed this, let me know. The last thing I'll say is that if you are planning on reading these and you're a person for whom audiobook works, I would highly recommend doing them via audiobook. I think it made the overwritten portions feel less like that for me. I haven't done the audiobook for Children of Memory yet, but I believe it is the same narrator who does a really good job. That's just a recommendation from me. I think the audiobooks are good. What else should you read if you have read these or you're planning on it and you want more in this vein? I had a ponder. I think if you haven't read Doors of Eden by Adrian Tchaikovsky, that is a book that deals with a lot of similar ideas about a world where this happened instead of humans, that kind of thing. Interesting. In terms of other series, the Tchaikovsky duology, Memory of Empire, is one that I think would be worth reading, mainly for the second book in that, A Desolation Called Peace, which has this idea of communication, which is so important in both book 1 and book 2 of this series. I haven't read the whole of the Ancillary Justice series, but that did also come up in my search of books that might be similar to this, and my sci-fi reading is so limited that I really just have to pull anything in at this point. But I think there's something there. Should you read these? My feeling is if you've read Adrian Tchaikovsky before and you know you get on with his writing style, or if you've read some of that more dense kind of sci-fi writing, I think this is well worth reading, particularly book 1. I would say if you were on the fence at the end of book 1, you don't need to go on and read book 2 and 3, but I personally did enjoy both of them. Have you read these? Do you have plans to? Let me know down in the comments below what your thoughts are. While you're down there commenting, if you haven't already, please do subscribe. It makes me feel loved and appreciated. You can also follow me on social media if you're that way inclined. You can come hang out on Discord where we have chill chats about books. I would like to say an enormous thank you to all the ghosts who haunt me over on Patreon. They support the channel and in return get early access to videos, bonus content, live streams and more. If you'd like to join their number, that's in the description as well. Thank you so much for watching. That's all from me and I will see you in the next one. There's gonna be some bloopers now. Today we are talking about Adrian Tchaikovsky. Today we are talking about Adrian Tchaikovsky. Ooh, that's a tough one today. In terms of other sci-fi works, I think the Tchaikovsky duology, Not Children of Memory, that's the series we're talking about now. Come on.